Assalamu alaikum everyone. How are you doing? Inshallah, we all have been doing well during these interesting times. We've had weeks of protests, we've had weeks of speeches and all this new stuff going on.
Pandemic and all that all together.
Right? So now, alhamdulillah, we're able to get back to our schedule. So, last week we
Inshallah.
missed our regular schedule, but we did present, some of the things going on at the rally that the masjid had last week. So, hope you checked that out. Hope you liked it. Um, we're getting back on schedule, and last week we talked about five of the minor signs to the Day of Judgment. One of those signs we spoke about was the shrinking of time. We talked about how that some of the ulama say that that's literal, and some of them say that might be a lack of barakah in the time. We also talked about the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being one of those signs. His coming as being one of those signs. We talked about the opening of Al-Quds as one of those signs. So we talked about a lot of different signs last week, and we want to continue this week with some signs. Last week we also introduced ourselves. Shadi, who is not here with us today. We also introduced Hiba, who is not here with us today. And we also introduced Montez, who is also not here today. But we have our sister here.
Assalamu alaikum guys, Safa here. Inshallah I'll be joining you guys, with you guys now from now on. As Jameel said, we're going to go ahead and continue with the next five signs of the Day of Judgment, inshallah.
So, regardless, right? You will see one of us, combination of us, three of us, two of us. It depends. But today, inshallah, we're going to discuss some more of the signs. So let's just jump right into it, inshallah. The next sign that we wanted to mention, and again, we said that we're not going to mention all of the minor signs. We're just going to mention a few. And we're also going to, there are some signs that are reoccurring, and some signs that happen only once, right? We said this earlier last time. So let's mention this particular sign. It's in Bukhari, and it says that knowledge will be lifted, and ignorance will replace it. Allah does not remove it by taking it from the hearts of people, but taking the lives of the learned religious men, and the people will appoint the ignorant over themselves. Right? Mm-hmm. So what we're hearing with this particular sign, right, is that there will be. So we know, like, for instance, a good example of this was during the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when the war against Musaylim al-Kadhab, the Muslims lost a lot of the ulama in that particular battle, and so there was a fear that the Quran would be lost, and this led Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to write it down, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves the knowledge of Islam in the scholars, in the ulama, right? And so what we're possibly seeing in our day and age is a lack of scholarship, a lack of individuals who have knowledge, and we end up appointing these people who aren't necessarily knowledgeable to lead us, right? Sure. And we see that today, right? So many different places around the world who have people who may have read a few books here and there, right? Who may have some type of ability to speak. And so, we flock to these people, and these are the ones that we end up appointing as our leaders, as our mashaykh. But in actuality, they're not qualified.
And the way they present it makes you seem, or makes you believe that, he knows what he's talking about and he is knowledgeable. However, we also have to recognize and always go back to the sources, to the main sources, and make sure that these sources are credible and we can rely on these sources. Yeah. So that, for example, that hadith, we have a hadith that are sahih, we have hadith that are da'if, and anyone can mention these hadith not knowing if they are accurate or not without mentioning the sources. So that's also something that we have to acknowledge. Not everyone that knows what, are confident in what they're talking about, and the way they're talking about it means that what they're saying is 100% true. We always have to go back and do our own research and look into it more.
Yes. So also, one more thing, we want to move on to the next sign, inshallah. Now that sign, so can you read that sign for us, inshallah?
The second one.
Yes, the next one. I think it's,
Uh,
I'll read it.
what number?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Um, so the next sign is the spreading of bloodshed. The Prophet ﷺ said, and this is in Bukhari as well, time will pass rapidly. Good deeds will decrease. Miserliness will be thrown in the hearts of the people. Afflictions will appear, and there will be much al-haraj. They said, "O Rasulullah, O Apostle of Allah, what is al-haraj?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, killing. Right? So we see that, and we see this now, right? Like,
We see it a lot wherever you go, whichever country you see. Like, for example, Muslims in China and Kashmir. Wherever you go, you see more numbers of like killing and murders and that kind of stuff all around the world, not just here in the United States.
so in this particular hadith, right, it mentions one about the passing of time, right, which we spoke about last week, right? And then it also speaks about miserliness being thrown into the hearts of people, right? Miserliness is our unwillingness to give money or to share or to give for charity and things like that, right? Alhamdulillah, there's still a lot of Muslims that give, but we do see that becoming more and more and more as a thing of the people, right? We're always seeing, even in entertainment, right? All of these stars and artists, all they talk about is gaining money, 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 money. Money is the only thing that seems to be important to them. And, they might give, and a lot of times it seems very fake when they give, right? Because they're giving because they want to have some type of tax write-off, or they want to be in front of the camera, right? All these different things, right? And we know that what is our traditions tell us, right? That we should give in such a way that the right hand or the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, right? That it should be so secretive that no one knows about it, right? So we see that in this hadith, and we see how the Prophet ﷺ is talking about the increase of killing, and there's so much of that happening right
Nowadays,
now, right? Just to call back to what we've been seeing with the whole police situation, George Floyd, so many black people have been killed by people who are supposed to protect them. Outside of that, how many wars do we hear about? Scores of individuals just passing away, dying, and we had the first major world war. So many millions of people
True.
passed away in this battle. So the Prophet ﷺ was truly speaking about something very futuristic in this particular hadith about the increase of murder.
And I just wanted to add, when
Yeah.
it comes to charity, that doesn't mean just money. For example, volunteering. When you ask someone, hey, do you want to volunteer? It's very hard to find those numbers. And you always find just a minimum number, like a small amount of people that are willing to donate their time and to participate in different activities where they get to help other people and just provide a better life for other people that are less fortunate. And I see this a lot. When you tell someone, hey, there's this activity, let's do 1, 2, 3, they'd be like, okay, what are we getting out of it? They would ask something in return. So that's what volunteering is you giving your time without expecting anything in return, and knowing that whatever you are going to get in return is from Allah, and it's inshallah will be in mizan hasanat, that kind of stuff.
So let's move on to the next one.
Sign 19.
Sign 19.
Yeah.
This one I experienced myself a lot. It's
I think
really,
everyone can relate to it. Yeah.
It's related in Imam Ahmed's collection of hadith, and he says one of the signs, or this is the Prophet ﷺ, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that you will only give salams to the ones you know. Right? So if it's not your homie, if it's not your best friend,
It's not someone that you
know
directly, you will not.
only salam to
Yeah.
the people that you know.
Exactly.
And we know, right? Here's some things about salam. That when we give salam, we know that, what does the Prophet ﷺ say? That when we say assalamu alaikum, how much ajr do you get? 10 hasana, right? Easy hasana, right? Or when you say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, that's 20, right? 20 hasana. And if you say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, 30 easy hasana. Easy. So easy, right? And we know that that is one of the rights of the Muslim. right?
Mm-hmm.
That when someone sends the salam, or that we send salam to each other, that's a right,
Yeah, when
right?
you tell someone salam, they would have to respond back.
Yeah, subhanallah. And we have to respond with what? An equal or greater
Mm-hmm.
greeting. So if someone says assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, we
Say
have
wa
to
alaikum
respond
salam
back at least with that, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, or wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi
wa
wa barakatuh.
barakatuh.
Right?
Yeah.
And these are small sunnah, but subhanallah, that we've kind of gotten away from. We always think there's some ulterior motive sometimes behind people giving the salams. If a guy walks by somebody and he says salam, well, why is he talking to me?
Yeah.
Or what did they have an issue with me? Or automatically negative.
Mm-hmm.
This is a greeting of peace.
And then even like here, I feel like it's easy to, at least like as a Muslim woman, like to see another Muslim woman wearing the hijab. Me knowing that she's Muslim, uh, seeing her in public, passing by another Muslim, just to say salam. It's easy as that. Um, Honestly, for me, when someone says salam to me, it makes my day. It makes me so happy. But at the same time, like you see nowadays, that we barely even say salam to people that we know.
Yeah. And I think also, like, with the salams, it's a dua. It's really a
Yeah.
dua. Like, when you think about it, you're saying, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. I mean, like, that's such a beautiful thing, and we
It
shouldn't
is.
shy away from that. Sometimes we're even scared to say the salams because we're in public and there's non-Muslims around us, and we don't want to give away the fact that we're Muslim or whatever the case may be. Be proud of your Islam. Be proud of who you are. That's a part of your deen. This is a part of what makes you unique. And we know that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rank is based not upon your race or not upon how who you might be in status. It's based upon taqwa, right? So we should want to say these things. These are good things for us to say, inshallah. Let's move on to the next one.
14. A competition in building tall buildings.
Right. So, and we know that, right, this is a portion of a bigger hadith. The hadith is the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. When Jibreel alayhi salam came down, and he came and he sat with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he questioned him about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, right? And then after questioning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about these things, he asked about the Day of Judgment, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that neither of us know when that's going to happen. And so then he began to ask him about some of the signs of the Day of Judgment. And one of the signs that he asked about that was mentioned, is that there will be men who compete in the building of tall buildings. And specifically not just men, but poor Bedouins who or shepherds who compete in building tall buildings. And wallahi, we see that now.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. It's not just in America where there's huge skyscrapers, right? We look in the Emirates and other places like that. It's literally like a competition. One guy might build a very tall building, and someone said, well, we could top that, right?
Even like when it comes to them building their own houses, like if someone builds a house higher, the other person would want to build a house that is higher and bigger than that.
SubhanAllah.
And they're like competing over, I don't, like, honestly, like, I don't understand it, but like when you, subhanallah anjad, when you see that and you see, like, you understand this hadith, you're like, subhanallah, like, what are they competing for?
Yeah. And what's interesting about this hadith is that, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everyone lived in flats.
True.
One story, mostly.
Same level.
Maybe they had 2 stories, maybe, but for the most part, it was a 1-story flat type of building, very small places that they lived in. So for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who had never typically seen a skyscraper, right? For him to prophesize this, it's a very specific hadith. And it says a lot about how the Prophet ﷺ was indeed telling the truth, about the times that we're living in. And when I hear these hadith, I get a little frightened, I'm not going to lie, because it's like we're living in that time, that he spoke about so many hundreds of years ago.
SubhanAllah, like us discussing the signs, you literally see it in every single sign that is mentioned.
Yeah.
That everything's happening nowadays, and we see it all, even if it's like not direct, we can still see it happening in this generation, like in this time.
So we have two more. The next one, inshallah, we're gonna explain it because I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. Abu Umama narrated that he heard Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "In the end times, there will be policemen who get up in the morning under the wrath of Allah and get into the evening with the wrath of Allah. So beware, don't be one of them." Now, uh, on the surface, you hear this hadith and you say, "Oh, so what? We can't be police officers now?" Right? That's the initial, perhaps the initial understanding of it. But this is talking about something very specific, something that we all experience during these times, as the desire to keep tabs on, the way people are living, the way our countries are set up. Security measures are growing, and the more that things might happen, for instance, shootings in schools, or terrible things that happen in other countries, there's an increase of security, right? So in America, for instance, we have so many agencies, right? The FBI, the CIA. You have regular police officers for every state, right? They have their in every small city has its own group of police officers, and then we have the state police, right, which is statewide, and that's just in our country, right? You go to other countries, they have their secret police. British, I believe, have the MI6 and things like this, along with their own police officers. So there's so much security over the world, right? And the Prophet ﷺ is talking about the people who get up and they have the wrath of Allah. These particular people are the people who spy on Muslims, right? And we see this a lot, right? We see that there are people who go out of their way. There's an interesting documentary that was done about some of the spying that was done in different Muslim neighborhoods. You guys should check that out if you ever get a chance. But it happens. And there's people who are going about their day regular, but they're constantly trying to keep tabs, always watching what's going on. So this is something that we're actually we're witnessing.
And it's not only in like in America and Western countries. It's also in like Arab and Middle East countries where all that Muslims are being watched every single day, every single move, even when they wake up to go pray Fajr in the masjid. Every single move they make, they're being watched. For example, they're gonna go get stuff for home. Oh, what is he doing? Who is he getting it for? So every single thing they do, even in other countries, they're still being watched. So subhanallah, even if we don't see it directly, as I said, it's there somehow.
So one more sign, and this is something that I want to mention so that we can be aware of it, be mindful of it. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ said, and this particular hadith, I believe, is in Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ says, one of the signs of their judgment is that there will be women who are dressed but naked. Their heads are like the humps of camels. They do not enter Jannah. They do not even smell the scent of Jannah, which can be smelled from a far distance. What we want to discuss about this is that in today's time, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a conscious decision and effort of the women of that time to dress modestly. And because that was the norm, it was easy to maintain that. In today's time, where Islam is not necessarily, it's kind of faded back into the background of things. Our standards are no longer the norm. The Islamic standards are no longer the norm. And what is the norm in society is what's promoted. So a lot of the clothing that is being made is made for, it's made a certain type of way. A lot of, and not just the clothing, but we also have now entertainment, right? Entertainment is constantly promoting a certain type of image for women. A certain type of dress code for women that they should carry about themselves. And we're seeing this. and it's so overwhelming that it has set the standard. It has set the norm. And so for our sisters, it's very difficult, one, to find things that that are modest, and then it's also not difficult because indeed it's all about our intentions, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And that we should intend to do as best as we can in dressing appropriately for the way that we were taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I just want to encourage my sisters, um, and Safa, you could definitely mention
I
on
just want
this.
to elaborate that, like for me, being born as a Muslim, it is easy to find places where I can get modest clothing, all that kind of stuff. But for people, for example, that recently convert to Islam and recently accept Islam, it's harder for them. I remember until today, I follow this girl. She accepted Islam, like I think more than 10 years ago. However, at that time, it was so difficult for her to meet the standards of Islam and when it comes to clothing. And at that time, she used to live in a village where there was no Muslims. There was no place for her to go and worship Allah. So her getting to know more Muslims and her moving out of the village where she was, she ended up making a company where it would provide Muslim women, especially those who recently convert to Islam, to find that kind of modest clothing. So that's something that someone that converted to Islam reached out to. So what about us that we were like, born Muslim? That we don't look at that stuff. We don't care about that stuff because we have it. So what about the other women that accept Islam recently? What about them? So I feel like we have to have to reach out to more people to just spread that awareness and give them more resources, like as much as we can.
I think also it's important to mention that I understand it's not easy.
It's not.
It's really not easy. That because here's the reality, right? Before Muslim women are the immediate representation of Islam. They will
True.
they will recognize the scarf before they represent anything that a man could wear that would make them think, oh, he's Muslim.
Yeah.
But they could automatically point out,
A
see a
Muslim
sister.
woman.
So it's not easy. I understand that we live in this world. We have our friends. We go to work. We go to school. Our environments are, we don't want to stand out. We don't want to look weird or
Yeah.
whatever the case be. I understand that. I really do. But I do want to encourage, the sisters to remember that, you do represent Islam. And you do represent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're his representative. You're the first line of what Islam is about. Our sisters in many ways. So
True.
to remember that, and to remember that, yeah, it may not be easy, right? But to buffer that, to make it easier, make sure we have Muslim friends,
Exactly. To
right?
have
Make
a,
sure we make sure our environments are Islamic. Make sure that we learn. This is so important that we learn what the Prophet ﷺ taught about dress and how we should be, and how the Muslims of that time did things so that we could kind of reinforce those things that we know to be true, right? So it's something that we have to take pride in. We have to love. We have to feel that we have that responsibility to carry on what has been taught to us tradition wise, and I think that it's a unique position to be in. It's a blessed position to be in, and the one thing that the Quran teaches us is that the dress, and I'll say this, and then we could maybe wrap this up, but that the dress is something that it not only brings honor to the Muslimah, right? The way she dresses brings honor to her, right, and dignity, right? But it also, and I always use this example, if you see a woman walking down the street and she's dressed appropriately, for most men, for most people, in their minds they know I have to address or come to this person a certain kind of way. So basically the way that person is dressed makes me feel compelled to treat them a certain type of way. right? For instance, and the way we know this, right? If we see a police officer dressed in the police uniform, we know that we come at him a certain way. If we see a man dressed in a suit or a business attire, we might think a certain thing about that person. If we see a person dressed in a basketball uniform, we might think, oh, he's a basketball player. So don't say that the way we dress shouldn't define us, but it does.
Sure, it does.
It does. So it's very important to see that one thing. That's one thing. The other thing is that I guarantee you, if you see someone dressed in a way that's inappropriately, it makes people feel like they don't have to respect that person. They don't have to give that person the dignity that they deserve. And my sisters, you deserve dignity. Always. So secure your dignity is what I'm basically saying. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. We talked about a lot of different things. More than likely, the next discussion, we're going to move on to some of the major signs. Inshallah. We've talked about, we might mention one more minor sign, maybe, which is Al-Mahdi, which I think we should mention. But we are going to start moving on to the major signs, inshallah. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys got something from it. And, remember, man, we're Muslims. We're living in unique time, especially with everything that's going on with, George Floyd's situation. Let's be the best that we can be so we can show everyone how Muslims get down. Take pride in being who you are. Because, alhamdulillah, we are living in the signs, in those times of the signs. And our time is dwindling. So, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Close that window, please. People have no respect.